Hello, my name's Rob and welcome to Swift Slots. Now, my wife has always liked Snoopy from when she was a small child, and after completing my midget build, that midget build was made by a company called Atlantis. Now, I had a look on Atlantis' website to see what other models they did because I enjoyed the process of building the midget model, and I just had a wade through and see what they did. And I found that they actually did a Snoopy racing car. This has actually got a battery in it and it runs and his head moves and all the rest of it. And I thought, I wonder if my wife would like that. Now, she does actually have a history of Snoopy cars. She actually owns this Hot Wheels. I've put it into a protective packet for her. She really likes this Snoopy Hot Wheels. She's got other Snoopy things as well. And I showed her this Snoopy model and she went mental. She absolutely loved it. She said, oh my, I've got to have that. I absolutely love it. Now, she actually does have quite a lot of slot cars. When I used to race HO, I used to run a club in where I used to live for HO cars. And she ended up with a larger HO collection than I actually did. We've still got all that stuff. One day I might show it on this channel. So she does actually have a history of slot cars. Plus, when she was a child, she used to play slot cars as well with her brother and so on and so forth. But she does like slot cars. So when she saw this car, she absolutely said that she must have it. So I thought, well, you know, it'd be great for this channel and I wouldn't mind doing it as well. So I bought the kit. Now, it's not cheap. It's almost £50, which is a lot of money for what it is. But, you know, it's unique. There's nothing else like it on the market, and it will convert to a slot car really well. And you'll see that when I show you through the box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you on the bench and I'll take you through this whole kit and show you what's in it and my plans for it. And then we'll take to the bench as always, and we'll turn it into a slot car, and we'll see what I can do with this kit, turning it into a slot car. So, having a little bit of a bias towards Hot Wheels myself as well, show you this Hot Wheels car first. Got Snoopy on his little doghouse with his engine on the front of his car there. It's all pretty cool. So, as I say, that's my wife's little Snoopy. And then we move on to the actual kit. It's a little bit big for this table really, but we'll deal with it. So inside the box, you get the instructions clearly, and then this box of parts. So here is the base. It's quite a large base. The car sits on these 3 pegs for display. And then we have, so let's put this box over here and I'll take them out one by one. So we've got the Snoopy components here. So we've got the exhaust pipe, we've got the wheel center, steering wheel, front grille, and then Snoopy's head. And on the next sprue, we have the chassis and the body. This is quite delicate. It's going to fall off that in any minute now. But the body is actually quite nice. There's lots of lovely detail on this body. It's going to make a really nice car. And it's about the same size as that Atlantis midget build that I did as well. So it's quite a chunky thing. You can see how big it is in my hand. It's not a small model. And there's the chassis there. And there we are. So that's the body parts. They're all pretty nice, to be fair. And then we have the front and rear axle. Now these are going to want modifying a little bit because in its standard form it's a bit flimsy, so we'll need to do a little bit of work on that. And then the next one we've got, that looks like a wheel center or something or another. Motor pinion, oh, it's his nose. And then we've got his helmet with his goggles on, which is pretty cool. And we've got some other parts of the mechanics to make his head move back and forth. And there is Snoopy's body. So it's quite a nice size, say compared to my hand. It's got a good size to him. And then we've got a set of tyres. Now, I'm not sure how well these tyres are going to grip, and they're incredibly narrow, but I think I've tried one on the wheel and they go on really tight, so they're going to be good for fitting on the rim, and they are actually rubbery. They're quite hard. They're not hard, really hard, but they're not soft. They're kind of in between. Whether they generate much grip, I'm not entirely sure, but because this Snoopy car has got a mechanism in it which waggles his head back and forth, I don't think we're going to be running this car too fast anyway. So I don't think grip is going to be a huge problem. And I will obviously just true these tyres just a little bit to make sure there are no high spots. Just more to get an actual contact patch to stop the car from jumping. More to make it run smoothly than grip. So that's the tyres. And then we've got, oh, there's another gear. What else have we got in this bag here? We've got the motor. Now I will be using this standard motor in the car. And obviously Ricard Valley has got adjustable speed control. You can turn the actual voltage down to the track itself. So this car is designed for 2 AA batteries. So around about, 6 volts. So we could probably turn the power down to about 1/3 voltage and then get what will be the equivalent of a top speed out of this motor. We can adjust it. But the point is I want to use this motor, and if it's too hairy for the track, we'll turn the voltage down because I don't really want to destroy the mechanism that makes his head move. But by the same token, we don't actually need to be running this car like a racing car. It's just for fun. It's just so that my wife can have a Snoopy car that actually works on the track. And then we have the stickers. So obviously we've got the grill sticker. We've got the Snoopy that goes on the base, a couple of number 4s, so, and a little emblem here. So that'll be quite nice. What else have we got in the box? One more thing here. We've got this component here, which is actually the holder for the front axle. Now this is going to have to be changed because that's nowhere near strong enough for a slot car. One bump on the front end from that and it's gone. It's the same as the assembly on the back end here. This is where the back axle just clips straight in, and it's not sufficient enough. It's only actually held in place by a gear, something along those lines. Not strong enough, so that's all going to have to be beefed up. But that's something that we'll tackle during the build. And the instructions are, as you would expect instructions to be, they're fairly coherent. As we can see now, we've got the motor in there and all the batteries and the way it all goes together. So you can see roughly how the car is intended to go together. And then we've got the way the back end fits together, and the mechanism for the front end here, which again this is the bit that will have to be changed for brass, probably clipped into the chassis in much the same way, but a couple of bearings soldered on there. The axles will need to be removed and changed for metal because they're not going to be strong enough, and Snoopy's simply clipped in, and that's all I should be doing. We want to try and keep it as like a toy, but just with the ability to actually run and run around the track and just give it a little bit of fun just for my wife. So there we are. So that's the whole build and all the parts, well, not the whole build, that's the whole kit ready to go. So let's get on the bench and start turning it into a slot car. Okay, so because I'm going to turn this kit into something that it's not really supposed to be, I want to work out where my thresholds are. So I'm going to build the kit, or the basic chassis, in its very basic standard form, just so that I can get an understanding of where the tolerances are and where I can and can't add material. So I'm going to get this kit all built up now, and then we'll take it from there when it's all together as one basic lump. Okay, so that's the basic car all built up, and now I can see roughly what I'm dealing with. So the first thing I see is this lovely area underneath here where I can hide a guide. That's an absolute gift. So the next thing I see is this awful front axle. Now that just isn't going to work. So the axle could be changed for steel, 3mm steel. This bar here can stay, but I'll make it out of brass, and I'll make some little outriggers coming out of here to hold that axle there in little brass bushes. So that's easy enough to do. You've got a nice area down here and on the other side where I think I can clip in a nice brass plate. So there's not a lot of weight to this car, so it needs a bit of weight. So I'll make a nice plate in there, possibly come off there with the tongue to hold the guide, I'm not sure, but somehow we can put a brass plate in here and then clip it in. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Also, the body's got some really nice clips on the side, so we don't need to worry about fitting the body to the chassis. These clips on the side there are perfectly adequate, so they'll work. And then if I get the body off, we can then see what's going on with the chassis. So there's the mechanism here. It basically just comes off of this cam down here, which rotates, and as that cam there rotates, it moves this back and forward, which in turn moves this arm in his head. It goes on the side there. So as that goes back and forth, it moves that bar like that, which in turn, his little scarf then turns with it as it goes back and forth, and his head. So none of that's really a problem for a minute. What's more of a problem is the back end. So first of all, I don't think that these clips are really going to hold the motor in all that well. So I need to just make a little brass over the top, or looking at it now, possibly what I'll actually do is come off of here, straight across and just put a little brass plate over here, because I don't think we really got the space on the, well actually we probably have, actually thinking about it, thought process on the fly, yes we have. Right, so we can either come across here as a plate and over the top there to encase that whole end in there, or actually yes, I probably could put a flat plate in here, fold the top over as a little flap to hold that over there, and then the plate can carry on going and form the mount for a rear bearing in this back axle. Much the same in the front, to be fair, so we can make 2 plates running down there. There's plenty of clearance here on the side, that's not a problem. So this pinion is not a very good fit on the motor, it's very loose. So what I'll do is I'll put an aluminium band around the outside of this pinion, quite a thick one. That means that I can get an M3 grub screw straight the way through the aluminium band into the plastic and onto the shaft. So the aluminium will hold it all together. So that's easy to overcome. The back axle, that will need to go 3mm steel as well, because this axle is woefully insufficient, and it will go through the wheel and hold on there, no problems at all. That gear then will obviously have a hole drilled through it for 3mm, and then the axle can run through that gear and bonds to that. That's easy enough. We can make a couple of limiters to go in there to keep the axle in the right place. And this back end is a little bit dubious as well. There's not really much going on here in terms of strength, so this isn't really taking a lot of power. It's only really wobbling his head back and forth, and I don't really like this here. So what I'll probably do is open this up a little bit and make that into a nice big round brass bush, which spreads over, so you've got a really nice solid mounting point. And then I can make this pin out of steel, and that can go up through, and that will form a nice rigid section there, and then the gear can then go over that as it is intended in this kit, and all good to go. So I don't think there's much else that really needs to be done to this. We're pretty much there. So what should we start first? I think what we'll do first is we'll make the side plates here to hold a pair of bearings and to hold this motor in. Nice 2 plates, and get those glued and riveted into place, and then we can move on to the next stage. Just before I start this work, and if you're wondering why I'm going to the trouble of replacing the back axle with a steel axle, I'll just demonstrate. If you look at the clearance between that pinion and that wheel, now you see the clearance, and now you don't. So there we are. I mean, that's not going to work. So let's crack on and get these supports made. Okay, so that's the back axle fitted into the car, and you'll notice that I've actually got the collar over the rear pinion. I actually forgot to hit record when I made this, but all it is a simple aluminium collar pushed onto the pinion with a little bit of glue as well, and then an M3 hole drilled straight the way through it, and then the whole pinion can be clamped to the motor. And you'll also notice that there's a different motor in it. It's actually the team slot motor from my A110 from a few videos ago, and the reason why I had to change the motor, because this kit doesn't actually have a sufficient motor in it for a slot car. It's a very odd motor. I've never come across one before. It will only run when it's turned by hand on the shaft. So if I apply power to it there, it won't run until I spin the shaft. Bear with me, I've got to get those terminals on. There. And then as soon as I take power off and then put it back on power, it won't start until I turn it again, and it will run there. Off and then back on again. There you go. All the time it's running, it'll restart, but as soon as you let it stop, it won't actually restart until you touch the terminals. And in the instructions, it actually says here that, where does it say there? To start the car, place it on the floor and push it forward. It will run until stopped. So that means that the motor won't actually run until you actually give it a kickstart, probably to save money from putting a switch in, but that's very, very odd. I've never come across a motor that ever does that. So that's a very limited use. But fortunately, this old team slot motor that I have with a bit of a chewed up end of the shaft is ideal for this particular project, because the chewed shaft makes no difference, and this is a fairly low RPM motor as well, so that should be absolutely fine. So other than the collar, if you notice, I've put rivets inside the end plates just to make sure that everything stays in line. And if you notice, when I actually glued it all together, I put car body filler on the inside here and here, because the plastic is a little bit instepped on this end, so to bulk it up where the rivet goes so you're not riveting through fresh air, I put a bit of car body filler on there first, a bit of 5-minute epoxy around the overall surface, put it all together and got it all happy. And when it was happy, I put a little bit of super glue top and bottom on both sides, just so I didn't have to clamp it and force it, and the super glue would cure it instantly, and that would allow all the other glues and fillers to dry in their own time. And that made it all nice and strong, and it's all very, very happy on the back end now. So with the back axle in and all looking okay, that will need a little bit of bedding in, but these gears are quite soft, so I didn't want to make it too slack, so I'll bed those gears in. So now that's all done, and the back wheel can go on when I'm ready. What I now need to do is just get this rear mechanism in, and that just involves measuring the gap between I've put it up there, measuring this gap between here and here, halving it, and making 2 brass collars out of this piece of brass tube going either side, and then push these wheels properly on. That one's actually already on, but push this one already on, measure the distances here, and then make up 2 collars that go in there as well, so you have 4 collars running along. That will finalize the back axle. Then what I need to do is make this hole a little bit bigger and insert some sort of brass bush in there, remake this pin that goes through there, but remake it out of steel, and then I can mount this gear onto that new brass and steel assembly up against this worm drive, and that will actually conclude the back end. Now, the reason why I ended up chopping the top of that plate out is because originally I was going to have it so that these plates come across here, and there's going to be solder a little step in there that pushes down on the top of the motor on both sides, and that would be what holds the motor in. But then I decided that maybe I might want to get the motor out at some point, and with this glued and riveted in place, there was never going to have that chance for the motor to come out. So I ended up opening up this top here so that you could eventually take the motor out if you needed to at some point. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a brass plate which bolts to this piece here and just comes across and just rests on the top of that motor like a finger, just to hold that motor down. I don't think it's going to need it. I'm pretty sure that that motor is solid, but there might be a chance. See, I can get a little bit of upwards movement there. So a little finger across the top there will stop that motor from ever moving. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to make the back end here, finalize the back axle, make this little finger, and then that is the back end completely and utterly finished, and we can move on to the front. And there we are. That's the whole thing finished, more or less as I planned it. And there's quite a bit more weight in the back end now with all that brass, so it's actually going to start helping to make it run smooth. And that's all nice and free. So if I put some power to the chassis, you can see it running. And there you go. This is only a 1.5 volt battery, and it's quite a flat battery at that. So it's running this freely on a flat 1.5 volt battery, so it shouldn't be a problem at all. So with the back end completely finished, we now need to turn our attentions to the front end. So all I need to do is replace this plastic beam for a brass one, a couple of bushes in either end. We can drop the axle into those bushes and then pop the front wheels on as intended. And then once that is done, we can drill a hole in the middle, and then it'll pop into this hole in the middle here, and a couple of rivets either side, and that will lock the whole front end in, no problems at all. Right, so let's crack on. Let's get this front beam remade in something a bit more substantial. And there we are. I think you'll agree we're getting very close now to something that looks much like a slot car. So this front axle now is much improved, really strong. It's going to take all the abuse that a slot car life can throw at it. So with that front end now done, I'm going to turn my attentions now to fitting the belly pan and then the arm to hold the guide. So the guide will obviously sit underneath this very nice plate at the front. And what I'll do is I'll drop down another one of these long bolts here to come out to here, and I should put an insert plate in there, belly pan, 2 holes and then 2 spaces on the end of these 2 bolts and then 2 more nuts. That's why I made this one so long, because I thought as I was putting it in, thought that will make a really good mount for the base. So there's a second long bolt there, cutter plate, 2 holes, and then from this belly pan here and also the bolt there, I should bring an arm up and forwards so that it'll actually hold the guide in the front. And then I'll make a washer that'll solder to that plate to give some thickness to this slotting plus guide, because that takes a 3.6mm hole, and obviously a little thin piece of metal is not going to work on this type of guide. So I shall machine up a little brass collar that goes right to the top, give it lots of support, and that will bolt onto the front, and then we'll actually have ourselves a working slot car chassis. ladies and gentlemen, it would appear that we now have a Snoopy slot car. And as you can see, the new brass axle is all in and working nicely. And underneath, we have a nice centering guide with a little bit of vertical compensation as well. When we put it on the track, move it backwards and forwards, the front wheels turn, but they're also free to turn stationary, which means the height of the guide is perfect. So just to prove that we actually have a moving chassis from a plastic kit, we will put some power to the track, and there you go. Absolutely no problems at all. Right, so now the chassis is actually finished, I think it's time to get painting the body. Okay, I'm just about to lay down this 2K clear coat system by Profix. It's 50% hardener and 10% thinners sprayed at 30 psi. Now before you spray any 2K clear system, you must use a really high quality mask at the bare minimum. Really, we should be using a full apparatus with fresh air feed, but for small little tiny jobs with very good extraction, you can get away with this standard mask on a irregular basis. Now my new spray booth is extremely powerful, and I say I've got one of the highest quality masks that you can get for small work. But if you do use 2K, tread very carefully and make sure that you've got plenty of extraction, or at least a really high quality respirator. And there it is, the full conversion into a slot car of the Atlantis models Snoopy's Bugatti for my wife. And yes, she was the one doing all that driving in that video, not me. She was the first person to drive this car on the track, and she absolutely loved it. And to be fair, it is a really cool looking model. So, how was this car as a kit? As a kit, it's ridiculously expensive. They could have at least used nylon for the gears and a couple of metal axles. Using the same plastic throughout the whole kit is not a good idea. And also using that silly kickstart motor, not sure that's a good plan either. Not, just to save a switch. To be honest with you, if you did build it as it was, put it on the floor and run it, I can understand them not wanting the drivetrain to keep going, because if it does hit something, it's just going to destroy everything inside it. So I kind of understand that stop-start motor, although it's probably cost-cutting for the sake of a switch. But if you run that drivetrain on this base here, which is probably what it's for, I dare say it's perfectly fine. But it's not going to work as an actual running model. As a model in itself, just to look at, it's extremely charming. It's really, really pretty. And to actually have it in your hand is really quite cool. And they've actually captured the Snoopy proportions really, really nicely. And it's got that charm about it. So I think from a model perspective, it's nice. From a working model perspective, it's terrible. And it is expensive. But what's it like as a converted slot car? Well, I can't put words on it. There's something about it. It's really, really cool. You have to see it. I built this car and I just built this car. It was fine and it was just like any other car and it looked nice and it was shiny and it was great. Wife loved it, etc., etc. But the second we put it on the track and watched it go round, it really turned a corner. It's definitely got that. It's got that something about it which makes it really, really endearing. It's a really nice slot car. And the wife absolutely loves it. And to be honest with you, I think it's, I dare say it, one of the coolest models that I've ever built from a cool factor. So as a slot car, absolutely yes. And with all that extra brass and metal in it and so on and so forth, it's really brought the weight up. I haven't weighed it actually, but I think it's around 200 grams or 175 grams roughly. And that's enough, because we only ran it at 45% power around the track, which is about 6.5 volts, and that was all it needed. You don't need this thing to go racing. It's not a racing car. It's a gimmick. It's a toy. It's something to have that looks pretty. And to that end, it works really, really well. You saw on the video they drift around a little bit, and it's fun enough. You can see his head moving as it goes down the track, and that's all you want from this. Just a little bit of nostalgic fun, and the wife absolutely loves it. So as a slot car, yes. As a kit, it depends on what you want. And there we are. That's the whole Snoopy build finished, and my wife loves it. Now don't forget, you can use any of these techniques in any plastic kit. Just because this is a Snoopy doesn't mean anything. The techniques to turn a plastic kit into a slot car are exactly the same, all bar a few tweaks varying from kit to kit. Doesn't matter that I've used this particular car to do it, or any kit at all. All the techniques are exactly the same, and I hope this has given you some inspiration to go and buy the kit in the shop that you like the look of and get your tools out and turn it into a slot car. So, if you've enjoyed this content, and I hope you have, maybe you'll subscribe, and if you could hit the little bell button, that would be awesome. So until the next time, thank you very much.